Let's code an SNES game entirely in Bash. And no, we're not gonna do Mario Kart or A Link to the Past or any of this junk. We're gonna write a real game. So the first line you're gonna need is the shebang. It's gonna tell Linux which interpreter should execute this file. And in our case is Bash. Then we're gonna need some variables for our game. Variables are gonna store data about, for example, the score, the health, what character is the player, everything. In our game, we're going to need functions. How can it help us? So in Bash, instead of writing those lines over and over again, I'm going to put them inside a function block, and whenever I want those lines to be executed, I'm simply going to call the function. So for example, in here I have the draw add function that's going to print to the screen the first, second, and third parameters that are passed onto it. And in here, I'm evoking the function. I'm going to passing as parameters the enemy row, the enemy column, and the enemy variables that are specified right here. I can call the same function and give it different parameters. The first one is going to draw my enemy, and the second one is going to draw my player. See what I have it? And yes, I can see my enemy and my player. I want my player to move, and in order to do so, I'm going to use the move player function. Inside of it, I'm going to have a switch case. Whenever I press W on my keyboard, I'm going to take the player row variable and I'm going to subtract 1 to it. So from 15, it's going to be 14. If I press S on my keyboard, it's going to be 16, and so forth and so on. And I can move my player with W, S, A, and D. A case statement compares one value against several possible choices, which is perfect for turning W, A, S, and D into different player movements. So at the bottom of my script, I'm going to add stty iCannon-echo that puts a terminal into a mode where individual keys can be captured immediately. Read is going to read the key that I'm pressing on my keyboard, and I'm going to call the move player function. At the bottom of my screen, I'm going to add an stty-iCannon-echo line that's going to put the terminal into a mode where individual keys can be captured immediately. And now for my game to run continuously, I'm going to use a while true do loop. This loop is going to run forever up until I break from it. Inside of it, I'm going to clear the screen, I'm going to draw my enemy, I'm going to draw myself, then I'm going to read a key from my keyboard, and I'm going to call the function move player. Back to my move player function, I'm using a switch case that's going to read an input from my keyboard and it's going to do something about it. A switch case is a simplified way of running an if-else statement. I don't want my player to run indefinitely, so I'm going to add an if-else block that is going to trap my player inside a limited amount of rows and columns. So those are the two ways of making decisions. I can use a switch case or I can use a bunch of if-then statements. Above my move player, I'm going to add this function that's going to spawn enemies randomly. And I'm going to evoke this function at the bottom. I also want a function that's going to make the enemy move towards me. So I'm going to have the move enemy function that every time I call it, it's going to make the enemy comes in my direction 1 row. I'm going to add a variable that's going to hold the number of enemies. Now inside my loop, right under move player, I'm going to add another block that's going to increase the number of enemies, and then if the number of enemies is greater or equal than 10, then I'm going to move the enemy, and in the end, I'm going to zero this number. Now I'm going to change the read statement with this, that instead of blocking forever waiting for an input, the read-t gives the keyboard a tiny time window, allowing the rest of the game to continue even when I'm not pressing anything. And right now my game is running too fast, so I'm going to add a sleep at the bottom of my while loop so that it waits for 0.05 seconds before restarting it. Now back to the top, I'm going to start giving myself a weapon. So I'm going to add those variables for my bullet. And I'm going to add the shoot function. This function creates a bullet only when there isn't already one active, which keeps our first version of the weapon simple. Now, inside my move player function, I want to add the F for shooting. So whenever I press F on my keyboard, I'm going to call the shoot function. And I'm going to add the function move bullet. The bullet gets its own function because it has its own game logic. It's going to move upward until it leaves the arena. Then I'm going to deactivate it. Now, on my while loop, I'm going to have to draw my enemy, draw myself, and also draw my bullet. And inside my game loop, I'm going to evoke the move bullet function to draw the bullet over and over and over again. Then I'm going to add a function for checking a collision. A collision detection is simply another condition. If the bullet is active in the enemy's column and has reached the enemy's row, we count it as a hit. And whenever we hit, we're gonna increase our score and spawn another enemy. So let me display my score. I have this draw HUD function now that's gonna display my score, and inside my loop, I'm gonna evoke it. Right here under clear screen. Now I can shoot, my bullet moves, I can check a collision to an enemy, but what happens if an enemy touches me? Then I should lose health. So I'm gonna add another function that's gonna check a player hit, that if an enemy is on the same row as the player, then my health is gonna be decreased, and I'm gonna spawn another enemy. So I'm gonna scroll down again to my game loop, and right here under check collision, I'm gonna also check if my player got hit. And on my HUD, I also wanna display my health. Since we're talking about my health, when's the game gonna end? I'm gonna add a check game over function that's gonna have an if statement inside of it. So functions can also communicate success or failure using their return status. So this function returns failure when the player's health reaches 0. Now I'm gonna scroll down to my while loop and I'm gonna add those lines. The exclamation mark reverses the result. So if the game over check fails, we break out of the while loop with the break keyword. After the check game over, I'm gonna add a cleanup function that's gonna clean up our terminal. And with those lines, I basically allow the player to hit Ctrl+C to exit the game. So let's see what I have so far. Here on terminal, I'm gonna execute my game, and I can move width to the sides and shoot with F. Yes, my score is going up. Faster, faster, faster. Yeah, it works. And what happens if we have a collision? Yeah, my health decreases. And it happens again. And I can quit with Ctrl+C. Perfect. But there's still something missing. The soul of the game is missing. So I'm gonna install mpvyt-dlp. This is gonna allow me to play a song from YouTube while I'm playing the game. So back to my script at the very top, I'm gonna add a variable for the YouTube URL of the song that I want to be playing while I play the game. And I need a function to play this song, so I'm gonna use the start music function that's gonna use the MPV tool that we have just installed that is gonna play the YouTube URL on the background and it's gonna capture its PID. I'm also gonna have another function to stop the music when needed. Because the MPV is gonna be running on the background, it's gonna be another process. So now Bash knows how to terminate the exact process it started instead of leaving the music running after the game exits. So I'm gonna scroll down to my cleanup function, and in there I'm gonna call the stop music to stop the music when I quit the game. Now I'm gonna scroll down to the bottom of my file while I have my game logic, and actually before starting my game I wanna call the function start music so that it starts playing right in the beginning before my while loop. Basically that's it. We have just coded an entire perfect SNES game in Bash. So let's see what is our final product. I'm gonna execute the game on my terminal and it's working. So go have fun with Bash. You gotta kill 1.2 billion enemies.